Today we had a unique conversation that we're going to share with you, which is from a Buddhist professor at Penn State University. And it was interesting because he had a Christian background, but he left the faith in a place of suffering, and he found Buddhism, which he thought had the best answer for suffering. And so you'll see in this video the unique differences of Buddhism and Christianity, specifically on the area of suffering. Hope you enjoy it.
Give me some. I'm gonna do Mr. Miyagi stuff over here.
All right, first, what's your name, man?
Kevin Briggs.
All right, so Kevin, what is the purpose or meaning of life? How would you answer that from your perspective?
Well, so I was raised Christian Presbyterian. I went to a Catholic high school and Catholic college, but then in my adult life, I've most closely identified as a really Orthodox Theravadan Buddhist.
Okay.
And more so probably Unitarian Universalist. Like I'm definitely mystic, open to lots of different perspectives. Raised my children Christian and everything, but from a Buddhist perspective, the purpose or the meaning of life is very simple. It's to reduce suffering and to cultivate well-being. Okay. And so from a Buddhist perspective, the condition of life is that suffering exists. Mm-hmm. A common misunderstanding is that only suffering exists. That's not true.
Correct.
It's just that it exists, and because of that, therefore it's like something we're constantly trying to solve. And so with all of our, from the Buddhist framework, yeah, all of our conceptions, all the contents of our consciousness, all of the philosophies we've come up with, all the divine inspiration, all the things that we think that we believe in so deeply to help address this concern, like with our great teachers such as Jesus, like all these people, they're all addressing the fact that people are trying to, from a Buddhist perspective, reduce suffering and cultivate well-being. Mm-hmm. And so from that perspective, no matter what you choose to believe, no matter what you feel so clearly seated in your heart, is less relevant than the impact it's having on you and the people around you. Mm-hmm. So if you're Christian, like my parents and like my children and all this stuff, and you believe that to be true and you see that clearly and you know it's true, like St. Thomas Aquinas knew it was true, great. You can do that thing, and as long as it is reducing suffering and cultivating well-being for yourself and ideally for the people around you, Buddhism would support that. Mm-hmm. Now there's a core Buddhist philosophy that doesn't utilize like mental conceptions and attachments, but it doesn't reject them either, because it just says...
It gives room for it.
There's room for it. You can almost do both in a sense. I mean,
okay,
pure Buddhist monk would say like, of course not. But for the lay practitioners and folks, especially in our modern world who have all this information, it's like reduce suffering, cultivate well-being. Meditate and pray,
And that like really is what you would say is the overarching purpose. And I've talked to Buddhists before. They have different definitions of that. Mm-hmm. Hey, how's it going, Greg? Is it, in your framework, is it possible to reduce or eradicate suffering? I'll rephrase that. Is it possible to eradicate suffering in your worldview?
No.
Okay.
What we can do is work on our attachment to suffering. So, for example, death, disease, and illness and loss will continue. So even in the greatest of circumstances with our one true love of our lifetime, who we meet when we're 17 or 18 years old and who we live a nice long life with until we're 100, what we know is that we're going to leave this world. Mm-hmm. And probably it's going to happen at different times. And so even under the greatest of circumstances, there's going to, at the very least, be that loss. Okay. And which is something that is conducive to suffering. The goal is to, though, have faith that suffering doesn't, that we have, is to work on our healthy position to the suffering. So we can do that via relationship with Jesus, and so we can know. Like I had some dear friends years ago who lost their daughter, a teenage daughter, and they were so, obviously they were devastated, but their Christian faith was so strong that because they had strengthened it so much in the good times, when they needed it in these really tough times, it was there to help impact their relationship with that suffering. Okay. And so the suffering's still there, but their faith in Jesus and their faith in God, or my devotion to Buddhism, is so strong. We build up such a strength in our religious spiritual practice that when those things come, they don't own us.
And so and that's why you mentioned at the beginning the universalistic. So you're not maybe the typical mainstream Buddhist views, but you're saying reduce suffering, achieve well-being for others, but you can do it in any way you want. Like there is not a
Unitarian
way.
Universalist perspective is that. Like I for sure would say that. Like
Okay.
I think all these different pathways to God or the divine or to this reducing of suffering, cultivating well-being exist because there's so many varieties of people. And so now somebody would say to me, listen, you got to choose one, Dr. Kevin Briggs. I would say Buddhism, like pure and simple. That like I would
The
go
original OG Buddhism,
like
not
early
your,
Buddhism. Like it would not involve external creator and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not quite the same as atheism because there are actually conceptions of spiritual realms in classical Buddhism, but they just don't matter for the humans, is what something like that. And so that's what I would say, but I also don't think that's the only way to see things.
Yeah.
I know people who believe so deeply in their hearts about their relationship with Jesus and whatever divine validation and experiences they have, and I don't question it. It's not for me.
Sure.
It's for them. Like I love that about them, you know?
And you mentioned like about the afterlife. So a lot of every religion and philosophy tries to attack this, solve this problem of suffering and evil. Everyone has their opinions and things.
Right.
A lot of them, and not just Christianity, but a lot of them use this idea of afterlife. That would be a solution. What do you believe about the afterlife and in regards to this problem of suffering?
Well, I think it exists, first of all.
Okay.
I think there's certainly enough from near-death experiences when science tells us that people are clinically and legally dead and all this stuff, which are two different types of death. But and then people come back and they talk about what they've seen, and there's like 14 or 11 or 14 indicators of what they commonly see. There's like tons of research on it. I mean, there's tens of thousands of reported cases. There's a whole near-death experience research center, I think, at University of West Virginia. That's like a whole department, and all they do is research it.
Yeah.
And so I don't question life after death.
What do you personally believe happens in your worldview?
I would say the closest I have come to figuring it out. I don't claim to have it all figured out, but I do. I have gotten to the point where I believe there's something, and from a Buddhist framework, which is what I most closely align with, so it rings most true with me. In Buddhism, there's a concept called dependent origination.
Okay, I think I've heard of that.
And all it means, it's basically like the ultimate, universal, infinite law of cause and effect. It's kind of like karma, but not quite. And all it means is that everything, nothing emerges on its own. So this obviously has implications for the idea of a creator, because the Buddhists would maybe say like what some sort of scientist would say, where they'd say like, well, we don't know a beginning and there might not be a beginning. The Buddhists would say something like, they would be more like, no, there wasn't a beginning. Yeah. Like one thing has led to another forever. There was never a point at which there was like nothing. And so because that's what the Buddhists say is true for physical matter, which we know is true in terms of like we know there's an organic reality that matter never goes away, it just transforms. The Buddhists would say if we believe that everything is subject to this law of impermanence, but is also subject to this idea of dependent origination, that everything comes from something and that everything never really goes away, it just leads to something else, that we know it's true for physical matter, and modern science or whatever validates that, but it also means it must be true logically for our consciousness. And so the Buddhists say that's how we know that the consciousness continues, and that's why our actions in this life matter in a karmic way, because everything we do leads to something else, and we do have the ability to choose how we behave and therefore cultivate the reality that we believe is most important.
Yeah, and so
and that can be after our physical body is dead.
Yeah, and I think that all supports that logically, rationally, and scientifically, there is something after.
Yeah.
But from your framework, it's not, this is exactly what it is, but you know that there is something.
There's a continuation.
But you just don't know what the second part of the story is.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it may not be.
It's good to clarify.
It's a different concept than like the Vedic or the Hindu concept of reincarnation. It doesn't have to do with coming back as something.
Yeah.
It's more so if you think of it just in terms of pure energy, which is a very clumsy way to put it, but it's like we understand
it's
that.
It's a way to summarize it.
It's more so of a way of it's simply in this law of dependent origination and cause and effect and expansion. Everything simply continues to be something else, including our consciousness.
Yeah. And what was your journey like from having a Protestant, then Catholic, and then your kids, you said, are being raised Christian?
Yeah, because their mom's a Catholic, and I support that.
Okay.
I want them to have a spiritual tradition.
What made you change from this, even Protestant Christianity, to Buddhism? What was that journey like? What was the key changes that caused you to make that change?
Well, number one, I had a poor spiritual upbringing from my parents.
Okay.
Not that they were trying to do a bad job. They just weren't real devoted themselves.
Okay.
And we just went to church on like Easter and Christmas, and then it was just Christmas, and then it was just not a lot of
It was
influence.
very limited.
Yeah. And so we're a product of how we're raised, I think. And then, but then when I went to Catholic school, I was blown away at just how devoted and systematic the people were about their faith. And like I didn't even know Catholics before that, but then all of a sudden they're all doing the sign of the cross.
Yeah.
They all know what communion and the Eucharist and the sacraments and all this stuff. And I loved that. And so then I went to Catholic college, and I tried forever to make Catholicism work for me. And mostly because I fell in love with my kid's mom, and she was Catholic, and we were always talking about it.
That can do that.
And, but basically, I just couldn't. There was an aspect of. I mean, honestly, it boils down to the resurrection and like your belief in the fact that that happened and was what people say it was.
The entire faith is built
Without
on
the
that.
resurrection, there's no thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's just the part. I tried for a number of years to really resolve it. And then I went at it through like Thomas Merton and Christian mysticism, and I was talking with the priests at Gannett University Catholic School.
Interesting.
And I tried so hard to make that work in a way where I was just like, okay, I get it. And I just couldn't do it, and I wasn't willing to accept the mystery. And then, and I didn't, and I personally wasn't satisfied with the evidence from like the Jewish scripture, the Old Testament, New Testament. Like it just wasn't enough. Like I wanted more, is what I remember thinking. I was also 21 years old at the time, but then I just happened upon I was reading all these philosophy books because I was trying to figure it out, and I ran across a book on Buddhism, and I just read it, and it was just like, I was like, oh my God, this all makes sense.
What attracted
and I said, oh my God,
to
this
you
all makes
most
sense.
about Buddhism? Like, what was the positive thing in Buddhism that nailed it for me?
It just, everything they were talking about reflected what my experience of reality already kind of was. So it was like, and then, so I wasn't like, I didn't leave it with more questions than answer. Like wasn't like, there wasn't all this stuff to figure out, like, or just sort of believe in because on a faith-based, there is a faith. Like, for example, the continuation and the consciousness and all that, that's definitely a faith-based argument. And that's the single point of faith, I think, in Buddhism, is that somehow our mind, not our brain, continues to expand. That's definitely, there's no way to measure it. But aside from that, that's really like the only thing that I felt like I had to take a leap in order to like accept. And so it just all seemed so grounded and organic, and I just was like, and then I read about it for 10 years before I finally sought out a monk, a Buddhist monk, and he was like a priest or something, and he became my friend, and we talked, and it was awesome, and I did a confirmation ceremony and stuff.
So you went through the traditional process of becoming a Buddhist. So you're not just the
New Age Buddhist.
internet. Yeah,
and in fact, I'm not a New Age Buddhist.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't even like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and similar to Christianity, like we can't assume what things are, and so even some of your currently held beliefs aren't the mainstream of Buddhism in some cases.
Like I go back to the oldest sacred scriptures there are, and that's my sword. Kind of like people who biblical scholars or something. Yeah. That's what I do with the Buddhist scriptures.
And I do that same thing with the Christianity. You do have to go to the original, to me, because it's over time things get changed, corrupted interpretations. You got to go to the original.
Yeah, it's just the most legit, and plus being an English professor, like I'm a reader.
Yeah.
And so I want to read things, and I just listen to people tell me stuff. Like I want to read and be like, oh yeah, I still read the Bible.
Yeah,
I love,
and that's
the
so
Gospels.
interesting.
Yeah.
Again, it's like because your family is so actively, and they're the Christian umbrella. I'm not Catholic, but under the Christian umbrella. Like, do you believe in absolute truth at the end of the day when it comes to things of God?
Do I believe in like that there's like a moral sort of absolute truth of things?
Even there's a moral absolute, but even just a truth statement that God is blank. That like because, and maybe I'll preface it, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, they have very contradicting views.
Yeah.
And so what my statement would be is they can't all be true. One, they can't coexist. And two, there at the end of the day, there's going to be an absolute truth about God. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in terms of just what I believe, I don't know. I know people believe in lots of different stuff.
Sure.
My absolute truth would be God is possible.
Okay.
It's like an agnostic.
But you're not
basically.
sure that God exists.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not actually part of Buddhism. Buddhism would just say whether you believe in that or you believe in something else, as long as it's cultivating well-being and reducing suffering, then we support that. Ultimately, I think the Buddhist way would be like ultimately that'll be an idea that a Buddhist would say ultimately that's an idea that you probably don't need, but they would also say like if you feel like you need it and it seems true to you, then that's your truth and you do it. Okay. So they also don't really claim to totally know. Yeah. But they'll just, like the Buddha would say, just decide for yourself. Don't listen to me. Yeah. Like
It sounds like suffering is a big deal for you because it is part of the purpose. And would you say that like passion for this idea of like reducing suffering from the Buddhist purpose, did that come from like personal experience in suffering or just seeing all the suffering in the world at large?
Definitely. I mean, I got serious about Buddhism when I was sick in the hospital when I was about 32 and wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. Okay. And so I realized right then that I didn't have much of an idea of the afterlife. And so that's when I started reaching out to the Bhante Pema, Pittsburgh Buddhist
that's
Center.
Interesting.
And so I got serious about, I guess, my soul or I got serious about all of that when I got sick. And then as soon as you go through some tough experience, you're sick, go through some tough experiences, the number one thing that one of the things that can bind us to other people is that we all have experiences with suffering. Yes. And we're all trying to figure it out. And so, like the Christians would say this too. It's like, this is what these like men. I went to a Richard Rohr men's retreat, the Rite of Passage. It was a Christian-based retreat. Yeah. And it was 100 men from around the world that attended this men's spiritual retreat a number of years ago. Every single one of them was there because they were experiencing some kind of intense suffering at the time, as was I, and we were all bonded, and that establishes the empathy. And then in the research, this is part of my dissertation, in the research, empathy is the gateway to compassion. Yeah. We can be compassionate towards others if we can be with their suffering. Like if I know how you've suffered and we've done it together, then I'm compassionate, I want to help you. Yeah.
In your current knowledge of Christianity, how would Christians answer this problem of suffering? And I'll maybe clarify and give a different answer, but I want to hear your perspective.
I mean, I don't claim to know this answer, but I think it would have something to do, I would imagine, like it would have something to do with the faith you have in Jesus. Okay. And like that Jesus maybe, and again, I think it has something to do with the fact that Jesus is who he claims he was and who Paul says he was. And therefore, if we put our faith in Jesus and the message and him as the example, as the teacher, and him as actually being like the way to God or whatever, I mean, like whatever the terminology, that is maybe the ultimate panacea or the ultimate truth, the closer we can align with that. And then what the Christian mystics, I think, would say is, and the place we realize that is in our heart. We realize that internally, not necessarily appealing externally to Jesus. It's like right there.
They're looking at the deity inside them. And a lot of times what Christians also say is that like, oh, God gives the hardest battles to the strongest warriors, kind of this like motivational thing, but it's actually not biblical in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And the first thing that I answered that question of Christianity, and I've looked at a lot of different religions, because this question is immensely important. And even for me, I didn't believe in God when I was younger because and I was maybe angry if he did exist, because I got diabetes when I was young, so I struggled with this idea of why would God allow this. And what's interesting about the Bible, and different than any other religion or worldview, is empathy, actually. Jesus empathized with us, that he suffered as we did. And to me, that's so important, because this idea and concept of God saying, oh, do this and you'll have less suffering, is not very compassionate or helpful. But the fact that God came down to the earth, and I know you may disagree, but Jesus being God came down and suffered as we do. He was tempted, was beaten, was rejected, all these things, was hungry, all these things. And then he had compassion from that. He wept. So when his best friend, even though he was about to raise Lazarus from the dead, he wept. So he cried with the people that cried. And to me, that's so important, because we miss the empathy and compassion of God. Because a lot of times God's like, people say, oh, just suck it up, you'll be fine, or God will make you stronger from this. It's like, that's not helpful when I'm in the hospital dying or something. Right. But he empathized with us. And then we look at the origin of suffering, is that, and this is more mainstream, is that sin is what caused death. and sin and rejection of God causes suffering. That doesn't
Originally from Garden of Eden,
originally
eating the
Garden
apple.
of Eden, yes.
That's okay.
And so I didn't necessarily do a sin that caused my diabetes. I didn't eat too much Tootsie Rolls to get like diabetes, the type that I have because it's genetic. But those things are all from the source of that. But God didn't look down and say, oh, they'll have to suffer and grin and bear it. He came and did something about it with Jesus. And he not only came to empathize with us, but he died and rose again. And it says in 1 Peter, it says that by his wounds we are healed. And there's an aspect of God does heal people. He hasn't healed me, and maybe he hasn't healed you. Maybe you're dealing with something. So it doesn't mean automatic healing. There's one aspect that he healed our relationship with God, that we
I
can
was gonna
know
say,
God.
it's not necessarily about the physical healing anyway.
Exactly. It's that
The
spiritual.
heart, yeah.
But in addition, though, there is a physical healing that is there too. And that's where he died on the cross for our sins to pay the penalty of our sins and also deal with the result of our sin, which is death and suffering. But then he's going to restore all things. And so it's frustrating because if I were God, I'm like, I would stop the famines and diseases here.
Yeah.
God, in his wisdom and that I don't fully understand, is waiting, and I believe waiting for people to come to him, but he's going to restore all things, that there is an actual hope. If Jesus didn't come back, and also if he didn't rise from the dead, what I'm saying is completely useless. But
You got faith.
But faith has to
And
be
the
based
fact
on
that
evidence as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Because if I'm blindly, if someone just tells me to believe in Jesus because I told you so, that's
gonna
not
work.
the pistis faith, because the Greek word is
No.
pistis. It's like based on evidence. It's more even close like to know. And so all the evidence leads towards one, Jesus being resurrected, but every other promise that Jesus has given in the Bible, and there's archaeology and all these things, manuscripts to confirm it, everything has come true. So why wouldn't the promise that he's going to restore all things become true as well? And that doesn't solve it. I'm not expecting you to be like, oh, I never heard that. But it's important to look at this empathy of God, that he's not this like pie in the sky telling us what to do and grin and bear. Because that's oftentimes what Christians say. But
Yeah,
he's
that's
actually
not helpful,
empathy,
yeah.
compassion. He lived it. He died for it. And he has a plan. In my perspective, I have not seen any philosophy of worldview that can actually solve suffering. They can reduce it as you're seeking
Or
to
change
do.
our position to it is the way I would say.
Correct.
Yeah, but right.
And that's fair.
Solve it for sure.
Solve
is
it,
not the thing.
because
yeah.
we're going
Yeah.
to be restored. And it says there's no more crying, no more tears, no more diseases, no more war. The only one that truly promises that is actually Jesus.
Yeah.
Whether you believe it or not, that's different.
That's what he's. That's
To me,
the
like
message,
rationally,
yeah.
it's the one that actually fully completes this puzzle of suffering that actually gives substantial hope. But
I like it, man.
yeah, last question on the resurrection. I'm just curious, what aspect like that is the hardest part for you to believe, specifically about the resurrection?
That it happened.
Okay, so you just don't.
Rising from the dead.
Do you believe that Jesus physically died?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's all true. Like I said, I don't have all the info, but just conceptually, whether, you know what I want?
What do you want?
I don't want it to matter if it's true or not. I want it to be like, maybe that happened with him and maybe he didn't, but like still it all is legit because it's not based on that stuff. If it wasn't based on a physical measurement, and this is a Western scientific view where you come in and say, if we can't physically measure it, it didn't happen. And I don't think that's helpful, and I don't know that it ever can be measured. We're bringing in a Western rational mind to try to prove something invisible from 2,000 years ago. And so it's like, I don't know that it's helpful to try to do it. I think people can still have the same faith and the same belief and embrace Jesus the same way and put all of it together without archaeology.
Yeah.
I don't even think if archaeology proved, like, here is the tomb, here's the rock, here's the bones of Mary Magdalene, who right next to the tomb, and look at her eyeball pointing right there where Jesus was. If something like that could happen, I don't even think it would matter. It wouldn't matter because it's not the point of trying to prove it. That's already, that work's been done. It's a matter of people like engaging with their spirit, and then like I'm not looking for a rational proof.
Okay.
Like
That's good to know.
I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible. This is not even possible to rationally prove the Buddha existed. Like there's all kinds of theories about it. Like it's about as much evidence as there is Jesus. And so it mostly is true, but there's holes, right? And so but it doesn't matter. And that's one thing I like about Buddhism is that it doesn't matter if he lived or not. There's nothing tied to his life other than we think he taught these things.
Yeah. But Jesus did claim like that he's the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to God except through him.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it does matter, even to the non-believer, because if what he says is true, that's a big deal.
I think that can happen that happens because we can conceive of it.
Okay.
And so like without our mind, this is all nothing. Like there's no thought to go with it. And so therefore what I think is that can be achieved whether or not he existed 2,000 years ago. What we're all doing no matter what is accessing this through our mind. And so my claim is that I don't believe that a proof for his existence in a physical form, or even the proof of some physicality of his resurrection, has to impact the fact that he's the way.
Yeah. And Jesus even says, like, we're not going to worship, like, in a one location. He says, you're going to worship me in spirit and truth. I agree with you.
Right this moment.
The Western mindset is different than Eastern. I spent a lot of time in Asia and China and India, and I've been to Buddhist temples. I've been to, so I totally get that view. And it sounds like you do have an Eastern-minded, and
for sure. I mean, that's what I claim.
which makes sense, yes.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
But
that's what I mean.
then if you look at that, like, okay, you don't even want evidence, and so that's not as important. But with this idea of, you mentioned like different energy and spirits, like Jesus was not only real, but he actually conquered all of the other spirits, that he defeated all other dominions, authorities, and powers in the spiritual realm. And I'm curious if you don't mind sharing, like, have you ever had any spiritual experiences in your practice of Buddhism, of like accessing the spirit realm or anything? If not, it's okay, just curious.
No, and this is my, because I do gotta get going,
yeah,
but
go.
the answer is no.
Okay.
I have had like amazing meditative experiences where it seemed like otherworldly or something, but there's no like definitive, there's no, I mean, I could make a claim that that's true, but I also don't really know, because all I was really doing was just sitting there in my living room.
Yeah.
And so, but that doesn't mean it wasn't happening either. It's almost like, from a Buddhist perspective, the answer to that question is irrelevant. And the only reason is because what matters is not whether we're gaining some proof of something supernatural or something that we didn't know existed and now exists. If that happens, great. But if it doesn't happen, we're still here in the present reality, and all that's actually happening is we're standing right here, right now.
Yeah.
That's actually what's happening. And so, from a Buddhist perspective, these are not, the problem, the tension between Buddhism and Christianity has always been that they have different outcomes in mind. Like the Christian outcome has to do with like a lot of what you're representing, and the Buddhist outcome doesn't really, it's not that it doesn't care as much about those same questions.
Yeah.
Like it's like saying, like maybe that's true or maybe that's not true, but really let's talk about the matter at hand. Yeah. That's what they say.
Yeah.
So it comes off as atheistic and offensive sometimes to Christians.
No.
But it's not a rejection. It's kind of perpetual agnosticism, and whatever's in service of less suffering and more well-being.
Yeah. And I would argue the only way to reduce suffering fully is through Jesus, and it's a different perspective. Thank you again for the conversation.
Can I have a card?
Yeah, let me grab you on.
No, I love talking. We could talk all day.
Oh, I know. I would enjoy it. I have like 10 other questions I wanted to ask you, just your perspective. And
well, let's connect on. I'll email you or something.
Yeah, email me. Sounds good.
Thanks,
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.